Selim 3 had no interest in joining anyone's empire. It had weathered solar flares, pirate raids, and the collapse of the Earth government without ever bending to anyone. Tucked in a resource-rich system far from major galactic lanes, the people of Selim 3 believed in two things: self-reliance and remembering who they were. They weren't subjects. They weren't assets. They were human. The colony thrived with minimal imports, its people fiercely proud and quietly prepared. When the first Empire vessel entered orbit without warning, there were no celebrations, no ceremonies. Just silence. Then scrambling. The ship, plated in obsidian alloy and bristling with weapons, broadcast a simple message on every public channel. This is the voice of Subarbiter Threx of the 3rd Outer Rim Compliance Division. Selim 3 is now under protection and taxation of the Galactic Sovereign Empire. Tribute required within 30 planetary cycles. No explanation. No negotiation. Just a command. Governor Julian Rain stood before the colony senate, his jaw tight, hands behind his back. He'd fought in the Earth Exodus Wars, earned scars in battles most in the chamber had only read about. He listened to the message again in silence. Then he said, "We're not paying a damn thing." Some senators argued compliance, that the empire was too large, too powerful, that Selim 3 was just a speck in the void. But most knew the empire wasn't here to help, and once tribute started, it never ended. It became slavery, one tax at a time. They voted 27-3. The empire got their answer within the hour. Humans do not kneel. The empire's response wasn't immediate. It didn't need to be. Like a predator circling its prey, it took its time. Probes scouted. Satellites were hijacked. Comms intercepted. The people of Selim 3 prepared. From the deep hangars beneath the capital, crews reactivated what they once called obsolete, the Titan's Wake, a retrofitted war frigate from the early Earth Defense Corps era. Outdated, slow, but still a beast. It was the only ship in the system capable of mounting a fight. Chief Engineer Mara Kenlock ran diagnostics, like a surgeon reviving a long-dead patient. Everything was rewired, refitted, reinforced. Hundreds volunteered for militia training. Hunters, miners, ex-soldiers, anyone who could shoot, fix, or carry. They stripped the shipyards bare, converted mining drones into kamikaze units, bolted scrap metal into makeshift armor for ground troops. If the Empire wanted a fight, they'd get one, not with numbers, but with grit. 30 days passed. 3 Empire cruisers arrived. Not warships, compliance vessels designed to pacify planets too slow to obey. Heavily armed, but arrogant. No formations. No caution. Just the assumption that their size was enough. Governor Rain stood aboard Titan's Wake, staring at the display. His face was emotionless. He gave the order. The Titan's Wake launched from its dry dock with a roar. No ceremony. No fanfare. Just purpose. It rose slowly, engines screaming from the strain of years in storage. It was old, but it was built by humans, and it still remembered what war felt like. The Empire's cruisers broadcast a demand for immediate surrender. They got railgun fire instead. The first volley caught the lead cruiser off guard, punching through its unshielded flank. The Titan spun, its aging AI predicting Empire firing arcs with deadly precision. 2 missiles struck its rear, but the reinforced hull held. Selim 3's orbital defense stations, designed for asteroid deflection, came online. Retrofitted with warheads and rail turrets, they opened fire. The Empire's arrogance began to crack. In less than 30 minutes, one cruiser was spiraling in flames toward the planet, another limped out of range, and the third held position, confused by resistance it had never expected. Then it retreated. The colony erupted in cheers, but Governor Rain didn't smile. He knew what would come next. That wasn't a battle. That was just the knock at the door. The real army would come. He stood before the people later that evening. "I was born in the ashes of Earth," he said, "raised among refugees. I've watched what empires do when no one resists. We have one chance to show them who we are, that we remember, that we are not subjects, not drones, not meat for their machines. We are human, and we do not kneel. Across the planet, farmers became gunners. Mechanics became engineers. Children practiced evacuation drills. Elders sharpened old tools. The planet didn't prepare for survival, it prepared for war. Mara and her team tore apart wrecked cruisers for tech. Human ingenuity met alien design. The fusion wasn't pretty, but it worked. Jammers, plasma pulse cannons, hacking algorithms. Nothing was off the table. Meanwhile, the Senate met in secret to vote on a proposal, whether to send a message to the other outer human colonies. Not for help. They weren't foolish enough to expect reinforcements. But to warn them. The message was short. Selim, 3 stands. The Empire has come. Choose your path, kneel or fight. Some colonies didn't reply. Others sent back encrypted acknowledgments. A few openly offered supplies. Quiet ripples in the dark, but enough to show they weren't alone. Then came the Empire's second message. You have violated Sovereign Edict 749. Hostile action against Imperial vessels constitutes rebellion. Prepare for full subjugation. The voice was different now, deeper. No longer a sub-arbiter. This time, it was a fleet legate. That meant war. The people of Selim, 3 didn't hold ceremonies or vigils. They worked. They trained. They rewired. There was no time for hope or fear. Only action. One night, under the stars, Rain stood on the surface, watching the sky. He wasn't a hero, just a man too old and too tired to run anymore. He'd seen humanity nearly extinguished once. He'd be damned if it happened again. He activated the Titan's Wake's long-range transmitter. To the Empire, we are the children of Earth. We remember the soil, the seas, the fire. We remember what it cost to survive. You will not take this from us. Not without a fight. Then silence. The ship loomed in orbit, a symbol, a defiance, a challenge. Below, on the surface, Selim, 3 burned every bridge that led to submission. There would be no peace treaty. No hidden compromise. Only resistance. The Empire would come. They would come with fleets, with soldiers, with fire and metal and fury. But Selim, 3 would stand. Because when the Empire looked down on a single insignificant human colony and saw a victim, they forgot one thing. They forgot they were dealing with humans. The Empire returned with fury. Not scouts. Not cruisers. A full battle group, 3 capital ships, 10 destroyers, and a swarm of drones that blotted out the sky above Selim, 3. They came not to negotiate, not to intimidate, but to make an example. The Empire didn't lose. And it didn't tolerate defiance. Titan's Wake was waiting. The old ship, reinforced with stolen tech and human desperation, didn't match them in size or firepower. But it didn't need to. It struck fast, disappeared faster. Hit and fade, cloak and strike. The battle didn't play by the Empire's rules. Selim, 3 refused to fight like an obedient colony. They lured a destroyer into a gravity, well, by faking a reactor leak. It imploded before it realized it was being hunted. In the lower atmosphere, converted mining drones tore through drone clusters, overcharged fusion cores igniting like miniature suns. The planet itself fought back, ion storms rigged with electromagnetic bursts, whether modified to cloak movements. Mountain ranges turned into railgun nests. The Empire was used to domination. It wasn't prepared for defiance that bled with purpose. On board Titan's Wake, Rain coordinated strikes not just through command protocols, but through instinct. Every move gambled resources. Every success cost blood. His face aged by hours, not years. Sleep was optional. Failure was not. The people of Selim, 3 adapted faster than the Empire could react. Their hackers breached an enemy drone relay station, redirected an entire wave of enemy bots to slam into their own carrier. Kenlock's tech division planted false signals across the orbital grid, causing the Empire to scatter their forces across phantom targets. They didn't try to win. They just refused to lose. And the Empire began to notice. Supply lines stretched thin. Commanders started to question orders. Some reports went missing. Others came back full of names they couldn't pronounce and tactics they couldn't explain. Fleets dispatched to Selim. 3 stopped reporting entirely. The Empire assumed incompetence. The truth was worse. In one ambush, a human saboteur team infiltrated an enemy cruiser, disabled life support, and let the void do the rest. They left a message carved into the hull. Just one word: free. In retaliation, the Empire burned Gaius for a neutral trade station suspected of aiding the rebels. Over 100,000 civilians died. No warnings. No broadcasts. Just a message sent to Selim 3. This is your fault. It didn't have the intended effect. Instead of breaking, Selim 3 hardened. The funeral broadcasts unified the fractured outer colonies. Silent acknowledgments turned into encrypted offers. Fuel, weapons, coordinates. Other worlds started watching. Some started resisting. On the ground, militia units engaged in guerrilla warfare against Empire drop teams. They used terrain, hack suits, EMP mines. Farmers became tacticians. Kids who once carried textbooks now carried rifles. Not because they were soldiers, because they had no other choice. And yet, despite the chaos, Titan's wake never left orbit. It stayed visible. A promise. A warning. A symbol. When the Empire's second fleet arrived, they came with new orders. Orbital bombardment. Wipe the capital clean. Reduce resistance to dust. They never got the chance. Titan's wake released a prototype gravity missile, cobbled together from mining explosives and alien stabilizers. It detonated above the fleet center, disabling long-range sensors and breaking formation just long enough for Selim 3's ground cannons to fire with untraceable precision. One capital ship took a direct hit to its bridge. The others scattered. In the confusion, stealth drones launched from hidden mountain ranges pierced the hangars of 2 destroyers, self-detonating in cascading chain reactions. The fleet limped away, not defeated, but humiliated. Rain stood before the command table, covered in ash and blood, his voice hoarse but steady. He didn't celebrate. He knew this wasn't victory. It was survival. The cost had been too high. Every gain was paid in lives. Every ship they brought down left a crater behind. But something was changing. Inside the Empire's ranks, commanders began requesting reassignment. Morale plummeted. Rumors spread that Selim 3 wasn't a single planet, but a coordinated resistance network. That the humans had something the Empire couldn't calculate. Rage sharpened by memory. The High Command issued a new directive: eliminate Governor Rain. They failed. 3 assassination attempts were made in 2 weeks. One bombed his quarters. One poisoned his water. The last tried to hack his neural implant during a live speech. None succeeded. Each failure made him larger than life. Not just a governor anymore, but the face of rebellion. The Empire increased pressure, targeting supply routes, jamming long-range communication, deploying specialist kill teams. But for every move, Selim 3 countered with creativity and sheer refusal to give in. Kenlock's team developed a virus that infiltrated the Empire's logistics AI. It was crude, brutal code, written by desperate hands in midnight hours, but it worked. The virus rerouted an entire convoy of supplies to an uninhabited moon, where humans were waiting. They stole everything: ammo, shields, fuel. They left behind another message, scrawled in plasma on the landing pad. You made us remember. By now, the war had outgrown its origin. The Empire began to realize this wasn't a rebellion. It was a contagion. The more they attacked, the more they spread it. Other colonies began open defiance. Sabotage, riots, full mutinies on remote outposts. And the Empire still couldn't crush Selim 3. So they sent Admiral Sarek, known across the stars for ending wars before they began. His doctrine was simple: destroy hope. He arrived with the 3rd Imperial Hammer Fleet. No diplomacy, no threats, just execution. Selim 3 had no illusions. They weren't ready. Not really. Titan's wake was breaking down. Supplies were critical. Ground troops were exhausted. Civilians lived in bunkers. The surface was scorched. Yet no one asked to surrender. The plan wasn't survival anymore. It was legacy. Rain made the decision. Titan's Wake would use its last jump drive charge not to flee, but to jump inside Sarek's formation and detonate. Kenlock wept, not because the ship was dying, but because they'd built something that mattered, something worth sacrificing. The jump happened at 0300 hours. The Titan arrived mid-formation, its hull already cracking from stress. Within seconds, it absorbed fire from 6 ships. The AI held the shield together long enough for the core to overload. Then it exploded. The shockwave shredded half of Sarek's fleet. The other half scattered, confused, disoriented. Ground units launched missiles at the stunned capital ships. What was left of Selim 3's resistance struck like lightning. And for a few glorious minutes, even the Empire looked vulnerable. When the dust settled, Titan's Wake was gone. Sarek survived, barely. Selim 3 stood. Not intact, not whole, but undefeated. Across the galaxy, news spread. The unthinkable had happened. A human colony destroyed an Imperial Hammerfleet's core command. It wasn't just a military loss. It was a psychological one. Sarek withdrew. The Empire didn't call it retreat, but everyone knew. And for the first time, the galaxy whispered the one thing the Empire had long feared. What if humans were never meant to be ruled? Not by kings, not by fleets, but by their own fire. The war wasn't over, but the illusion of. The Empire retreated, but not in defeat, at least not openly. In their official broadcasts, they spun it as a strategic withdrawal, a pause, a recalibration. But behind locked command halls, the truth was undeniable. The loss of the Hammerfleet and the destruction of Sarek's flagship had shaken the foundation of Imperial authority. A single human colony had pulled it off. That fact couldn't be erased. On Selim 3, there was no celebration. Half the planet was in ruins. The other half lived underground. Supplies had dwindled to dangerous levels. The air was breathable, but not clean. Water had to be recycled through 10 different filters. Every child on the planet had aged a decade in fear. They had survived, but not without scars. Rain was gone. His last broadcast had looped across the outer colonies, ending with the words, "They will bury us, but they will never forget who we were." His absence turned him into a symbol. People whispered his name with reverence. But those who remained knew that winning one battle didn't mean the war was over. Not with the Empire still watching, still breathing. In secret, Selim 3's surviving leadership initiated a desperate plan. They couldn't repel another full-scale attack. They wouldn't survive a war of attrition. But they had something far more dangerous. They had made contact with other human colonies. Not a few, dozens. Spread across the outer rim, long silent, now stirred awake. Each of these colonies had its own history, its own grief, its own anger. Selim 3 had lit the match. Now they passed the flame. What began as signals turned into strategy. Smuggled goods became joint supply chains. Civilian transports turned into stealth couriers. Isolated uprisings started syncing their timing. Not one rebellion. 100 fractures in the Empire's armor, each placed precisely, each cutting deeper. The Empire responded with panic, disguised as order. Governors were replaced. Fleet commanders were purged. Fear crept up the chain. From the outer rim to the central core, worlds that had bowed for centuries now questioned everything. Then came the defection. Admiral Riven, one of the Empire's most decorated tacticians, defected. Not for ideology, not out of pity, but because, as he put it in his first transmission, "I fight to win, and your Empire forgot how." He brought with him 3 ships, encrypted data cores, and the location of 12 hidden Empire black sites. His defection ignited chaos in the high command. Trust fractured. Every admiral was now a suspect. Paranoia replaced strategy. Selim 3, once just a rebellious dot on a map, had infected the heart of the machine. And then came the rallying cry. One human colony, Delphra Prime, broadcast a full declaration of independence. Not just resistance, Not just refusal. Full, formal severance from imperial rule. The declaration ended with the words, "We were born of Earth. We were forged in fire. We do not belong to you." Thousands watched. Not all responded. But some did. Then more. Planet after planet joined. Some in secret. Some publicly. One sent a fleet of supply carriers to seal them. 3 without escort, knowing the risk. They arrived. Half destroyed. But they arrived. The Empire's resources were vast, but not infinite. With so many colonies destabilized, it faced a problem it had never prepared for, a war without a center, a rebellion without borders, and worst of all, an enemy that no longer feared it. Selim. 3 still bore the brunt of it. The Empire didn't forget its defiance. Raids continued. Bombardments struck cities already in ruin. But with every attack, the colony responded smarter, faster. Human tech evolved. They built better signal scramblers, smarter auto turrets, drones that acted on instinct. Each piece of knowledge passed to other worlds. This wasn't resistance anymore. It was evolution. The Empire's attempt at total suppression backfired. Their brutality became propaganda for the resistance. The images of burned cities and broken children turned neutral colonies against them. Even some non-human species began questioning their allegiance. The illusion of a benevolent empire shattered, replaced by something raw and ancient, fear of extinction. The humans didn't beg for freedom. They took it. The tipping point came not from firepower, but from data. Kenlock's successor, a young prodigy named Solon Mwrar, cracked into the Empire's neural archive. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't dramatic. But it changed everything. What she found was centuries of erased history. Massacres. Genetic experiments. Worlds destroyed before their names were even known. And buried deep a revelation. The Empire had always feared humans. Not because of their weapons, but because of their minds. Humans adapted too quickly, broke rules too easily, refused submission too naturally. The Empire's own archive labeled them as containment priority species. From the beginning, humans were seen as a threat to long-term galactic control. That was why Earth had been isolated, why colonists were scattered, why so many records were lost. Solon leaked it all, not just to humans, to everyone. The response was instant. Protests erupted on core worlds. Alien species began to see humans not as pests, but as prisoners of a system that feared them. Imperial outposts lost contact. Fleet command structures collapsed for mutiny. Logistics froze. The Empire didn't crumble in one day. But from that moment, it began bleeding faster than it could heal. On Selim 3, there were no speeches, no declarations, just quiet work. They rebuilt what they could, buried what they couldn't. Children planted trees where buildings once stood. Engineers taught kids how to solder. Soldiers taught them how to aim. No one waited for peace. They made space for it. The last fleet the Empire sent never reached orbit. It was intercepted in deep space by a coalition fleet that bore no flag. Only one message was sent to the Imperial Senate. Selim 3 was not the end. It was the beginning. Years passed. Maps changed. Borders collapsed and reformed. A new order emerged, not centralized, not clean, but something else. A loose alliance of independent human colonies, connected not by rule, but by memory. They called it the fracture. Not as a badge of honor, but as a scar they refused to forget. Selim 3 remained a scarred planet, half rebuilt, half sacred ruin. It became a place of pilgrimage, not for worship, but for remembrance. Veterans walked its burned soil in silence. Children were taught its history like scripture. There were no statues of rain, no monuments to Titan's wake, just a black stone in the center of the old capital. It bore no name, only a phrase etched into its surface. We do not kneel. The Empire still existed, but it had changed. Its influence waned. Its name lost weight. In the outer rim, it was no longer feared. It was watched like a wounded animal that once hunted everything in sight. In time, new enemies would rise. New wars would come. But none would forget the day a single human planet made the galaxy stop and look. Not because they were powerful, not because they were chosen, but because when the universe expected submission, they stood up, looked the galaxy in the eye, and said, "No,